Crawford, director of Puss in Boots: Last Wish. And Pierre Perifel. Pierre, if you're in the audience, join us, the director of The Bad Guys.
There he is, Pierre. Great to see you, man. Amazing. Thanks, man.
Hey, everybody. Wow, what an amazing movie, man. I haven't seen it. It's so good. It's so good.
We get to work together. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll ask you a few questions, and then we'll give the audience a chance to also ask their burning questions about both movies. Something that I think it's interesting about the direction that DreamWorks has taken these movies is the use of the 2D effects and the 2D stylization in both The Bad Guys and Last Wish. Can you talk about sort of why was that important for each of your films?
Well, you really pioneered it, being the first movie this year. So you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna kind of speak for both of us, but I think we've been working in animation for so long, and we've been seeing the same type of movie renders, over the years, since CG is becoming as the prominent medium for animation. And I think all of us in the industry have been always wanting to can we push it further? Can we just do some more graphic, or blend the mediums, blend the medias, blend the looks, get back some of the illustrative 2D feeling that we all grew up with. It's just really to open the door to more opportunities and more different looks and more varieties when we see in the movies, And so I think a lot of the industry is actually shifting a little bit this way. For me, that was important. So it's also going back to the roots and what I kind of grew up with and the influences that I grew up with. And I think it's the same probably for you.
We were on Puss in Boots as we were figuring out the look ourselves. We were geeking out about Bad Guys because we were seeing some of the finished shots, and it was awesome to have you guys kind of pioneering the path of, even though the end looks they both have 2D and CG aspects. They're different blends in a way, but there was a lot we were able to kind of mine from what they were discovering, and I think one of the coolest things, the president of DreamWorks, Margie Cohn, and the chief creative officer, Kristen Lowe, were really not just supportive, but also challenging in a great way of wanting all the filmmakers to basically use a wider set of tools to tell more specific stories. And so us being able to really push the style, doing a painterly style in Puss in Boots, was so supported by the studio.
It's interesting because the tools we use and the way they are built for our movies are they don't give you this naturally. You have to fight the tools to get to a look like that. Computer will give you something perfect almost, everything will be perfect, and everything, the lighting will just bounce off exactly the way you want it to bounce, and the effects will be very, realistic simulations unless you tweak it. But to push it and tweak it even further and to get this kind of look, which is more flat and 2D and illustrative, you have to really, fight your way through all the software that we're using. So it's not something that is easy to do. And it's one of the reasons also why throughout the years in this industry we've landed to kind of a consensus in terms of the computer graphic looks, which is looking amazing, but I think it can feel a little redundant, and I think Joel and I wanted to kind of push it a little bit further. Which is cool too, is every time we make a movie at DreamWorks, we have those movies are paired as sister shows, and so therefore we can, like Joel said, we can really influence each other and see what they were doing, and they would see what we were doing, and just kind of have that kind of support across two shows.
For The Bad Guys, you're sort of adapting, very popular graphic books for children. Were you sort of taking cues from that too?
Yes, of course. Mostly in terms of story, in terms of the characters, those books are very, very stylized and simplified and very, approachable and also for younger readers, right? And for us to support this story on a bigger screen, we needed to up the complexity of those visuals and just make sure it was there was something to look at that was rich and interesting and of course colorful, and I also, selfishly wanted to explore some kind of like more anime-inspired kind of designs, that were not represented in the books. But the fact that it came from a graphic novel, yes, of course, it kind of influenced a little bit the idea of going towards something more stylized.
And Joel, for you, you're working, with characters that are, some of them very beloved for decades now. The last Puss in Boots movie came out 11 years ago, so what was sort of like your mandate to make something that feels unique and your own while respecting this sort of legacy?
Yeah, it's a balance, right? Where it's like we have this beloved franchise, the Shrek world, Puss in Boots. The last one, like you're saying, was over a decade ago, and these are characters that are very special to a lot of people, and you don't want to break what they love, but for us, we wanted to expand, and that was visually and also tonally. That we felt like, with any good continuation of character stories, you're not just reliving what you love, you're taking them somewhere new. And for us, the look was so tied into trying to go on a deeper journey with Puss as well. And so our goal was like, this could look like a fairy tale painting, but we could also expand what a fairy tale is. The Shrek world is so fun with like the fairy tales that it's kind of parodying. But in this, we're like, we could go to some maybe more surprising areas. Grimm fairy tales was one of our inspirations, which are a little bit darker. They're these cautionary tales. But for us, it all came back to, this is a story about Puss in Boots who's on his last life, which on the surface, a cat having 9 lives is absurd. And that's great. That fits in a fairy tale. But underneath that, he has 1 life. We all have 1 life. And we wanted to really take this opportunity to go, we could go further and deeper by maybe going scarier, but at the end, there's a bright kind of tone. It's a celebration of life. And so all the ingredients we felt like had to keep coming back to that kind of marquee for us.
I wanted to ask you guys about the worlds themselves and the bad guys. This depiction of LA that is very unique and referencing perhaps action movies or crime movies from decades past. Can you talk a little bit about that, Pierre?
Talking about the reference we used?
Yeah, and sort of depicting LA in this way.
I mean, it definitely is kind of an homage or love letter to the city. I mean, like I arrived here 15 years ago and just grew completely fond of the place in Los Angeles specifically. I think it takes time to start to like the visual quality of this city. When you come from Paris, it's very different. And so, but after you really start to just get so impressed with the lighting and with the that layering of the city through the fog and like the different architecture that you can see in the houses and how green it is. I mean, and so it definitely there was a part of me and the team that wanted to really explore this in this place and kind of just homaging this location. There was also definitely, a reference to a lot of movies, Live and Die in LA and Heat and the Tarantino films that are like really taking place here, and then you can go and see and check where they've been shooting those films. So in those movies, those breed of films are kind of definitely part of the references we were using for Bad Guys. So it was kind of a combo of two things. And then after that, in terms of the action films that we wanted to reference, and of course heist movies. At first, it kind of started for me like watching the first book of Aaron was like, oh, this is Tarantino, and we can do like Tarantino for kids, but it's a little tricky to do. There's a lot of swearing, a lot of blood, and actually, I met a guy who was responsible for the makeup for Tarantino and was saying there is a type of fake blood labeled the Tarantino blood, and it's a very specific color that he uses all the time, and they bring in every time they do a shoot with him like hundreds of gallons for him. So for an animated film, it's very tricky just to go there and just do a Tarantino film. So we quickly moved towards something that was more like heist films and Soderbergh and his films, and it ended up being kind of a heist genre type of action movie, and which I so love, and a lot of us love. But underneath all of these heist movies are tricky because usually it's all about the magic trick of the the heist, right? But we needed to, for animation and family audiences, we also needed to just deepen the characters and have a message, like you were talking about. And so that was the hard part, because you can't just fully explore the heist. You also need to have emotion.
Joel, in your case, you're working with the sort of fantastical Spanish countryside, and then these forays. Tell us about creating the world.
Yeah, so like I'd mentioned, like there was the fairy tale kind of inspiration. The movie does kick off in kind of a Spanish world, but there was like an overall tone that the co-director Daniel Mercado and myself kept coming back to, which was, the Puss in Boots world is really special because it's part of the Shrek universe and the Shrek fairy tales. But for us, Puss in Boots also has like a foot dipped into the spaghetti western, the Sergio Leone, and that was something that it felt like we really wanted to thread throughout the story, and was like a big influence for us. Not only in the world, like in the scene where Puss is confronted by the bounty hunter, the wolf, it turns into a western there. I wish the movie could be 3 hours long and we could pace it like a Sergio Leone movie, but there was even down to the wolf's whistle, which we pulled from the Ennio Morricone kind of inspiration, where there were always these beautiful scores that were juxtaposed with like pretty like gritty and violent kind of things. And Once Upon a Time in the West, there's this harmonica that just keeps coming back through, and it's eerie, but it's beautiful on its own. And our composer, Heitor Pereira, came up with this hauntingly beautiful whistle that the wolf brings. And just throughout the story, we found we just loved whenever we could infuse a Western feel, down to, as I mentioned, even creating characters. The Perito, who starts out as a dog with no name, is a reference to the man with no name, the Clint Eastwood kind of characters. And even, there's a shared kind of world with Sergio Leone movies, which is also on the eastern side, the Akira Kurosawa movies, which inspired a lot of Sergio Leone. And there's The Seven Samurai, which is one of my favorite movies. There's a character in it who's kind of this rogue samurai who's not respected at the beginning, and he ends up kind of being the heart of the team. And he's played by Toshiro Mifune. And anyway, that was a big inspiration for the dog's character, that we thought, it's this character you feel like doesn't belong in this story. You're like, everybody's like these awesome like criminals who are after this wishing star, and you have this one character who's just loves to be with everybody, just wants friends, and it made for such great contrast and comedy, but also kind of carried this theme of appreciation and already having what you need.
So Tarantino and Kurosawa for kids.
That's cool. I'll take that.
Did you guys share notes on each other's big bad wolves? I think it's interesting that you guys both have a wolf character.
Wolves are cool, right?
Well, I love the design of your wolf too, man. It's interesting, and there's when you make movies, we tend to have to develop so many movies, and not just in one studio, like across all the studios in the industry, and you would see those synchronicities and weird things happening at the same time, even across the studios, right? You would have, like, I don't know, at the time it was the fish world, and then the bugs world, and the blah blah blah, and all these studios would be kind of doing or tinkering with the same type of characters. It's very interesting. I don't know why.
Yeah, but what's cool is yours is, I know it's bad guys, but he's the good guy, and
right.
Really takes on. There's so much charisma. And yeah, the second I saw, Pierre's an amazing artist as well. Your early drawings of the characters, those designs are so appealing. Oddly enough, found the wolf. I think going back to the inspiration of Grimm fairy tales, and wolves were a lot of times used as the cautionary character. if you don't do what's right, this will happen. And a lot of it was death and scary. It was fear, and Wolf's kind of embodied that. And so it felt right to bring in this Wolf character in a different role, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, those two movies are kind of like inspired by fairy tales for sure. And Wolf is such a prominent figure there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Can you guys talk about working with your cast? Both of you guys have this very big ensemble cast with, A-listers and people that, have perhaps not done a lot of voice work. And, Anthony Ramos, for example, or Awkwafina. And, Joel, you're working with Salma and Antonio were, pros at this.
Go for it.
Yeah, it was interesting coming into this world of Puss in Boots. I storyboarded on the Shrek world, and being an artist at DreamWorks for so long, I'd been around these characters. But when the first time I pitched to Antonio, like just walking him through the story, I was like, oh, he knows this character way better than I do. And that was kind of freeing to go, as long as we'd have these conversations about where his character's going. But really, I mean, Antonio just, he breathes that character to life, going seamlessly between like comedy into this vulnerability, and so a lot of it was just giving Antonio context and having conversations about where his character's going and letting him kind of getting out of the way. And then Salma Hayek on the other side it's really cool with Antonio and Salma because their characters with Puss and Kitty are so like always trying to one up each other, and you just feel this history. But Salma and Antonio are like, they have this history in real life with each other, and it's this brother and sister kind of competitive nature, and like Salma, when we record with her, because we don't always record the actors together, but there was something special, and like she knew Antonio so well, she'd like be reading a line and she's like, oh wait, did Antonio read it this way? And she'd like just do a great impression of him. And it's just amazing, like you have this chemistry that you get by those two. But I really credit the whole cast, like Florence Pugh as Goldilocks just brings this depth and this kind of, she has this grunge to this kind of Cockney gangster character, but there's this heart underneath it. And all of the cast for us, they were these ongoing conversations. We'd walk through the story, and they would really, they all independently brought their own experiences to it's funky with a mic. They brought their own experiences to the role, and like I'd mentioned, that this theme of appreciation and gratitude just rose with each actor pointing out, all these characters are after this wishing star, this thing that they think will fix their life and make them happy. The one thing, if I just had this, will make me happy. And really, it was such a great partnership with our entire cast to find not just the relationships of these characters to each other, but also what this movie was about.
I have to ask about the cricket. We talked briefly about it before, but just knowing that is someone that worked in the production as well.
Yeah, he has a short IMDb list. He's our story and edit supervisor on. He was in editorial with us.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And and the way we work is very kind of improvisational, where you're coming up with, you're trying to fix story things as you go. You reboard, you rewrite, and you come up with things in the room. And we came up with, Jack Horner, this horribly hilarious character. We're like, we need to put him with the most earnest, sweet character. And there was definitely some inspirations from like Jimmy Stewart that were in that cricket. And yeah, just being in the room, this very talented, surprisingly talented voice actor was just doing impressions. And we're like, a lot of times we use our own voices while we're waiting for the actors to record. We put up the movie with temporary voices, and everybody just fell in love with that voice. And we're like, no need to go shopping around. That's our guy, Kevin McCann.
Awesome.
Pierre, tell us about your voice cast.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, very similar to yours. We were looking for a cast that was, because one of the underlying thing that I wanted to do is like something that movie that felt cool at the same time goofy. It was kind of the idea, right? And I think and it was a heist movie, very heavily influenced by, I said it, Soderbergh and his film. And so kind of the idea of going towards the usual suspects that we all thought about at first, Brad Pitt and George Clooney and Julia Roberts and all these guys. There was something, these guys are legendary, but are they cool for the goofiness that we're trying to do? That was like kind of the reasoning behind it. So we're like, okay, let's try to go like someone who could do kind of both and not just be suave and have that swag that Mr. Wolf has. And so that's when we kind of, we don't do auditions in animation. We actually just, grab some clips from actors and try to cut them against the visuals of the characters. And we stumbled, which is our casting director said, what about Sam Rockwell? Which we are all massive fans of, and just sure enough, the voice is like spot on, and we know he can do whatever he wants. This guy is just such an amazing actor. And so starting just with him, pitched him the film, and he's in right away. He's like, yes, I love this. I know exactly what I want to do with it. But immediately he was like tuned into the character. He was like, yeah, he's kind of George, but not just George Clooney. He's also, Jack Nicholson, and he wanted to bring that rawness of a wolf. And I was like, yeah, but he's also kind of a, Marty McFly from Back to the Future, that goofy goofball that, So I wanted all of these facets, and it was like, yeah, gotcha. So he said yes right away, and then of course when you have Sam Rockwell in your cast, like a lot of the other actors were just dying to work with him, so so they quickly said yes. But all of those voices were supposed to be really cool voices with such a unique quality to each of them, and of course for Sam, because he's a character that has 3 times the amount of lines that any other characters in the cast, we needed a very deep, heavy actor kind of thing. But all of them are very tailored specifically to their own cast and to their own characters. Anthony, of course, just brought so much because we wanted that, Hispanic flavor. We wanted also him being able to sing. There was a lot behind the Awkwafina. Just her voice itself is so unique. It was just perfect for that. And then the other thing that I wanted to do from the beginning was really just get them to record them together, which is not easy in animation, because putting 2 actors in the same sound booth, they can't really overlap each other, because we need clean takes for each of their takes, for each of their lines, so that in editorial we can, after that, we can move the sound exactly where we want it to be, so the timing is right. So if you record together and they start overlapping each other, then you're bound to their timing, and you can't really move and change anything. But guess what? COVID happened, and we were home, and we had to record them from each of their, in their homes. And so we were able to just do some recording sessions with 2 or 3 or 4 actors together, just overlapping each other through, video conferences, which was incredible. And so therefore, that was one of the intent from the beginning, is get that, very live action flavor to the delivery of those lines, as well as dialogue itself. Yeah, incredible cast.
Before I pass it on to the audience, I wanted to ask you, Joel, just briefly about, how the liberty that you had in this, perhaps to push it in terms of the violence. I was kind of shocked when I saw blood, because I don't think I've really ever seen it in animated films. And it feels that the stakes, it makes the stakes higher. It feels very organic and natural, and like you really feel that there's danger there.
Yeah, that was definitely a discovery tonally of what kind of a surprising thing. I think that's the first blood in a DreamWorks movie. We used the Tarantino blood.
Right. The whole studio was like, did you see what they're doing? They're putting blood in Puss in Boots. Everybody was like, what?
Well, it's funny, because when we first set out to tell the story, I love comedies. I'm like, I just personally feel like I love how comedies tell the truth in a disarming way. And so I pitched the studio like, this is a comedy. And oddly enough, that bar scene where Puss gets his head cut open was the first scene we showed to the studio. And to their credit, they were very trusting, because it went back to this story is about this cat who it's ridiculous. He's lost 8 lives, but we found we needed to really believe the stakes of the movie, and we didn't set out to put blood in the movie. It just was like a story a lot of times tells you where it needs to go, and we kind of just found that as we reworked the scene, we're like, I think you need to really, the audience should be right there with Puss in Boots. It's been fun. We start out with a musical where Puss is singing, and it's this fun ride, and Puss is oblivious, and the audience should be enjoying that fun too. And then really when you get to this point where it knocks the air out of Puss, we're like, should feel that same way in the audience, where you go, oh, wow, there's high stakes. And I think that helps carry us through the rest of the movie.
Absolutely. Are there any questions from the audience? Right here?
Yes, hi. Massive fan of both movies.
Thank you.
Very much for
Thank you.
everything. My question is directed towards Pierre. I would like to know I don't know because if it was in the source material or not for the original bad guys, but one scene that always stuck in my head was when Wolf was trying to save the cat in the tree, but it always made me think, why is that cat a regular cat and not like an anthropomorphic cat like the rest of the animals? And what is it about like every single animal in that movie is technically a criminal per se or is in crime or stuff like that, but all the humans are like, oh, we're just either cops or just good guys. So I just want to know, was that part of the source material? Was that an artistic choice? Things like that nature.
Did you like the movie?
Oh,
No?
I loved it.
Great. I'm kidding. No, that's a great question, and one that we, trust me, have been asked so many times. In the books, it's actually just animals. And for me, it was like, what was not working with this, I mean, again, the books are amazing. It's really, really fun. But something that was bothering me with this is like, how would first of all, I didn't want to go the predators and preys direction, because first of all, it's been done 2 years before us or 3 years before us. You all know which movie that is. And secondly, it was not it wasn't the subject. The subject was about like preconceived ideas about stories we've been told about somebody, you know. And so it would be very hard to know how a lamb or giraffe would react seeing a piranha, right? There's no fear there. And whereas us as humans, we're afraid of piranhas because we tell stories about them and because we pass them on. And same thing about the big bad wolf, you know. Is like a lion going to be scared of a wolf? Probably not, you know what I mean? So to me, those characters are just, you know, representation of human fears and metaphors for our fears. And that's all they are. And they are actually humans with a mask of an animal. So therefore, in this kind of paradigm, you can imagine that these characters that are bad guys with masks on, of animal masks, that we, you know, our ideas, our fear are projected onto them. They're just humans, and so therefore there is also cats and guinea pigs and other animals, actual animals there. So that's the reasoning behind it. And most people seeing this are like, okay, there's humans and there's animals, and all right, whatever, let's keep going, and it's fun. That's it. So that's the way I take it. When you're really not making sure that we don't explain this, because it took me 20 minutes to explain it to you, and so the movie would just, you know what I mean? So we just cleverly avoided explaining anything.
There's a question there, on the right.
What made you want to make those movies? Like, no one forced you to make the bad guys movie. No one forced you to make the new Puss in Boots movie. What made you want to make those movies?
That's a great question. Do you
I
want to
love
say?
that question.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great question that when you get an opportunity to direct, I'm sure you're the same way, where as a kid, I just loved drawing. I would draw all the time, and I mean, just dreamed of like working in animation one day. So everything, like when I started storyboarding at DreamWorks, when I got that job over 17 years ago, it was a dream. And so everything was like, this is amazing, I get to do this. When you have the opportunity to direct a movie, that's such a great question, because you don't want to just do it because, hey, the Shrek world and Puss in Boots is so popular, just tell another story. you have to find your personal way in of how it relates to you. And that's always, for me, just boiling down the essence, get rid of all the details and go, what's underneath this that I feel like as a human being, and what has been my experience. And so I think that's really that's what drives you, because these movies take a long time, a lot of hours. Animation's very hard, and so you have to have this nugget of like, why am I telling this? And for me, that's why when I boiled down, this movie is a celebration of life, and how grateful we can all be about that gift that we've all been given of one life to live it well. I kept coming back to that during the long hours, and so it's a great question.
Yeah, it's actually the question we ask ourselves first, right? It's like, why do I want to do this film, right? Yeah, it's my answer is similar to Joel. It's the same thing. It's like, what do you find that connects to you in your personal story and your personal tastes as well? So there was a part of me that was like drawn to it for Bad Guys from the angle of, oh my God, I got the luck to tell my own story on screen with all those influences and the look that I want to make, and I would love to watch these images, and so because I've never seen them before, well, let's make sure we can create them and just share it with whoever in an audience, right? But then deep down, of course, there's what you're talking about. It's the personal relationship to the characters themselves and what they're going through. And so for me, it was like a character changing life, like going through a personal crisis was the same thing, like something I was connecting to.
Okay, want someone from the back. Where?
Hi, I'm an animation student, and I just wanted to
Awesome.
ask, it was very uniquely anime styled in between with the 2.5D. Was there any particular reason to combine 3D and 2.5D, or was it just a visual appeal?
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably have both different answers, but kind of the same. Where, so for us, we chose to use this not fluid animation, not everything on ones, which, like you're saying, CG animation gives you that. Everything is smooth. But what we call stepped animation, where things can be held for 2 frames, 3 frames, 4 frames, and you get a different feel, a different effect. For me, it's cool, but you shouldn't do it because it's just cool. That we really, for Puss in Boots, said this is a story about Puss, who's kind of living this fairy tale point of view of he's immortal, everything is turned up and exciting and fantastical, and that's when in action scenes, we'd use this stepped kind of animation, which feels hyper fantastical. And then when we switch it up, like in the doctor's office, when he finds out he's on his last life, it's everything's on ones, it's more grounded, it's what we're used to. And so using it as a tool to tell the story was our conceit.
Yeah, I think Puss in Boots is probably even more stylized than Bad Guys in a way, in terms of the 2.5D that you're talking about, like where like texture is so painted, right? Even more, I think, than Bad Guys itself. And so, like, to me, seeing stylized animation just go hand in hand with that flat look too, which we haven't done in Bad Guys. Everything is fluid, it's on ones, except for the closing and the closing simulation, which just gives you that little bit of a, connecting both the stylized look, but also not always completely fluid style of animation. Because when you do traditional animation on paper, you don't animate every frame, or you don't draw every frame. It would take too long. So we used to, when we were doing that, we used to do a drawing every other frame. Japan anime, sometimes we'd go to do a drawing every 3 frames or 4 frames, so it runs at 24 frames a second, but then you just run, 8 drawings that are held 3 frames each, for instance, It still gives you the illusion of movement, but it's making it so much more stylized and illustrated. So some people like it, some people don't, but for us, it was like a way of just bringing back that feeling of traditional animation into the film, and I'm sure there is part of that for you as well. It's a very great way to to experience a different style of animation, but one that is like inspired by traditional animation.
Any advice for animation students?
I think you're in a. It's a great field. Just keep pushing and be patient. I mean, to me, it's like there's so much to do in this field, and it's not just animation. It's like animation, of course, encompasses also VFX and is very close to illustration and comic books, and it's a big industry. So there's so much to do there. Just it's a few things that make sure that you not just, I would say, copy other artists. It's so easy to do that now with Instagram, where you have like resources to thousands and thousands of artists that are all amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, not all, but like the one you start following are like, wow. And then it's very easy just to get inspired by them and do what they do. What usually I look for, and I'm sure the same with you, is like, I want to see someone who has a unique voice, And so don't be inspired, but don't copy. Just like become your own artist. And yeah, that's about it, right?
Great advice. I think because it's always a challenge where you're inspired by so much great work, but I mean, whether you're looking for an animator, a storyboard artist, a character designer, you're looking for their voice, and so there's that aspect. But animation is so collaborative, and that's what I love about it. That to make these things, you need over 300 people, and so it's being inspired, but also knowing your own voice as well.
We'll take for the kid right here. Yeah.
Are you going to make the bad guys too?
Do you want to see a bad guys too? Oh.
That's awesome.
I can't say anything, but like I'm thinking about it.
I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, everyone.
There's another movie
Thank
playing.
you.
The Bad Guys is playing next, so stick around for that if you haven't seen it.